Serious criminal defense lawyers of Reddit, who's the most disturbing potential client you've come across? Did you defend them? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I'm a public defender, so I can't turn people away if I don't like them. How disturbing the person is and how disturbing the offense is are rarely linked. I've had people accused of murder that I've quite liked. I've had people accused of shoplifting that had given me the heebie-jeebies. People who are in denial about their addiction tend to be the most annoying. People with antisocial personality disorder tend to be the most eerie. But the vast majority are just regular people. Maybe they make bad choices, maybe their priorities are whack, maybe they just screwed up or got super unlucky. There, but for the grace of God and all that. I had a client once who had beaten his girlfriend with a lamp and also held a massive carving knife to her neck. He was super cheerful and friendly towards me, but it was clearly an act. He had no sense of personal space, no apparent remorse, and he hardly ever blinked. I did try to represent him, but he did a runner, and I never heard from him again. I did legal aid in prison for a few years and encountered a lot of disturbed inmates, but two of them will always stick in my mind. The first was a giant biker meth cook who had survived several meth lab explosions. The first day we met, he came into the attorney-client room in a long-sleeve button-down and made a big production of slowly taking it off to reveal a patchwork of scarring, skin grafts, and prison tattoos like I had never seen and hope to never see again. My dad was a burn victim, so I'm not squeamish about scars and grafts, but this guy's whole body looked like it was patched together from the bodies of several different guys, and it was quite a sight, especially the fresher tattoos. I can still picture it clearly when I close my eyes. The worst, though, were the pedophiles. We got a hugely disproportionate number of child sex criminals because so many of them were middle to upper class guys who were accustomed to filling out paperwork and utilizing public services, as opposed to the poor kids who got tangled up in drugs and gangs who found our application paperwork too daunting. They were all terrible, but one of them was the absolute creepiest person I've ever encountered. He was formerly very wealthy and was trying to defend the last of his assets against a personal injury case filed by the parents of one of his victims. His defense was that he and his 6-year-old victim were in love and nobody else was capable of understanding their relationship but the two of them. He was so delusional and so defensive, it was the only time I ever had to put my hands on an inmate because he got up in my face when I said I wouldn't and couldn't offer that defense in a pleading. He was completely calm and reasonable while discussing this absolutely atrocious relationship, but as soon as I challenged it, it was like he flipped a switch, and I could physically sense the violence and rage radiating off of him. I dealt with all kinds of terrible criminals during that period, but he was the only genuine serial killer type monster that I ever ran into. My tutor had to defend one of the few serial rapists who is currently being held in prison at Her Majesty's pleasure, legal term in the UK for saying their sentence is indefinite. She said when she had to go in for a conference, he kept saying when she got him acquitted, he'd take her out. Halfway through, he starts shaking his leg, and the court officer immediately rushed in and pulled her out. Apparently, he starts shaking his legs before he's about to rape someone. It was later found out he did it just to mess with her. She did have to defend him, but that because in the UK, they practiced the cab rank rule, meaning, ethically, you cannot refuse a client if they meet certain requirements. I'm a criminal defense attorney. The most disturbing defendant wasn't actually a client. He was accused of a crime committed against a horse owned by another defense attorney. Apparently, in the small South Texas coastal town where my friend has her practice, the local Mexican voodoo witch doctor had determined that he was losing his powers. The witch doctor apparently believed that the only way to maintain his powers was by sneaking into my friend's horse stable at night, taking her horse and moving it to a different stable so that he could commit uninterrupted acts of ritualistic sodomy on the horse. Based upon the copious amounts of body fluids found at the scene, it was believed that the 80-year-old witch doctor had needed quite a bit of horsepower to keep him strong and had performed the ritual many times over the years. My uncle once defended a woman who used a razor to make tiny cuts on her homeschooled 12-year-old daughter's face and body. torso, back, legs, buttocks, feet, foot soles, hands, fingers, ears, lips, gums, everywhere. There were patches of old and new scars, and clean cuts and infected cuts overlapping each other. Turned out that the woman's husband was sexually abusing the daughter until she caught him doing it one day. She kicked him out, filed for divorce, pulled the daughter out of school to homeschool her, and started the daily ritual of cutting her daughter's body. The ritual continued for about 2 years until some of the infected cuts made the daughter very sick, which forced the woman taking her to the hospital. A doctor or nurse took one look at the kid and called the police. The woman claimed she was helping her daughter, who had been saying she was feeling dirty. So my uncle framed the woman's actions as an attribution to PTSD, which she acquired from catching her husband in the act, and a misguided desire to help her daughter. Unsurprisingly, he lost the case. I don't remember the details of the sentencing, but the kid was taken into a foster home and set to receive a skin grafting treatment to replace the worst patches on her body. Filipino lawyer. I had this young client whom I represented pro bono. Case is slight physical injury, and he was the accused. When I interviewed him, he said the plaintiffs started the confrontation. They said they just hit them out of self-defense, but I saw the CCTV of the event. He failed to mention that he took a piece of wood and hit it with the victim. I felt tricked. At least it taught me a lesson to be more vigilant. Yes, I am still defending them, but I hope for it to dismiss. They are hard clients. I used to practice immigration defense, and as the junior associate, I had to take whatever cases the partners assigned me. I had to write a brief arguing why a guy in prison for aggravated battery to a child under 4 shouldn't be deported after his prison sentence. He went to prison because while he was babysitting his girlfriend's 2-year-old daughter, she wouldn't stop crying. So he held her hands under extremely hot water from the faucet as a punishment, I guess. The little girl ended up disfigured with severe burns up both her arms. I had to make an argument about the crime charged not being an aggravated felony for immigration purposes. I'm very liberal about immigration, but I wanted that fucker out of my country. About 18 years ago, I represented a man who was homeless and was insane. He thought there was a website that said he had sex with his sister and everyone on earth knew it. He lived in his car but kept his shampoo in a locked box in the trunk so no one would put poison in it. Slightly paranoid individual. He was at a sandwich shop across from a trauma hospital, fortunately. The 17-year-old kid behind the counter said something to the effect that he was a crazy motherfucker. The client went to his car, got a .38 special, and chased the kid, shooting him in the back twice. Fortunately, the hospital was close, and the kid survived, but he lost a kidney, I think. I remember the kid and a bullet went through an organ. I sent my client to the VA for a psych eval. I got a call from his psychiatrist stating under no circumstances should my client be out on the streets. I asked where he was, and she, the psychiatrist, said he was discharged and left the VA. I provided her with the paperwork to file an involuntary commitment where the client would be sent to the state mental hospital. As his lawyer, I was not able to do so because of attorney-client privilege. I was prohibited from testifying as to what the client said to me. The psychiatrist did not file the paperwork, but issued a letter stating he was not competent. The client continued to walk the streets in his paranoid state. My client pled insanity and eventually pleaded guilty to a felony aggravated battery, but the gun was removed from the charge. If convicted with the gun being part of the charge, the client would have automatically gone to prison. It was his first offense. He got probation. My client had no remorse for shooting the kid. Client kept complaining that the kid said the client fucked his sister. These were the client's own words during sentencing. Client acted like the victim the entire sentencing. Once probation was graded, the client wrote a bar complaint against me because he was convicted of a crime. I received a letter from the bar addressed to the client, closing the case without further review. Fortunately, I have not seen him since. He probably passed away now. He was in his 70s then. During my time at the public defender's office, I had a guy assigned to me for a first-degree murder. This wasn't your average murder case. He had a daughter who was a senior in high school. She was in the top 10% of her class. She got invited to a college prep summer program, and she needed a car to attend. The dad, my client, offered to give her a car, but she had to have sex with him. The day that he told her this was her birthday. He went to a cheap motel and got them a room, and she agreed to the deal. He had sex with her, and then after they finished, he took a pillow and smothered her to death. He then left the hotel and walked straight to a liquor store where he hung out with the people and drank with them for a while. He called the police a week later and turned himself in. He had never taken a shower, and he was covered in every region of his body in her DNA. When I went to meet him, he never once admitted guilt, even though there was video evidence of him at the hotel and leaving the room. He never wanted to talk about his case, and neither did I. I work as a paralegal for a criminal defense attorney who takes a lot of court appointments. The case that sticks out in my mind would be Susan's, not her real name. Susan was really personable, and I was almost sold on her innocence until we received discovery. She was charged with multiple counts of child abuse or neglect. Her boyfriend was sexually assaulting her daughter. Her daughter told Susan what was going on multiple times, but finally stopped reporting the abuse because her mom would slap her and call her a liar. This girl lived in absolute hell for years because her mother would rather have a man than be alone. The boyfriend would take the child to school each day and make her perform oral sex on him before he dropped her off. I read the child's statement, these incidents out loud to Susan. She responded, "I was molested when I was little too. And if it's something that just happens, fuck that cunt." I agree with others that sex offenders in general are most disturbing, but I do have one anecdote to the contrary. I defended a sex offender, serial rapist, who was probably the most model client I've ever had. He basically posed as an agent for rap video producers and enticed young girls, took them to abandoned houses and raped them. Outcry usually didn't happen until he split and didn't call back, but on 2 or 3 cases, the outcry was immediate. Even on those delayed outcry cases, the evidence was pretty clear that it was non-consensual. However, he was very active in his defense, was interested and gave good input. It was a difficult case, and we basically had to fall back onto a defense that made him into a bad guy, just not to the serial rape bad degree. That he was just dumb, horny scammer who tricked girls who got mad that they got tricked and reported his high pressure, but still consensual sex as rape. Usually, clients get mad if we have to portray them in that light, but he was very understanding and cooperative. The defense got an unexpected boost when a couple girls testified completely unprompted that they got aroused and orgasmed during the rape. Ultimately, it didn't work, and he got slammed to the tune of almost 300 years in consecutive sentencing. But he didn't complain or showed any emotion other than regret. He thanked us profusely. It's been a few years, almost 10, but I still don't have a habeas notice, so I guess he's resigned to his time. Pretty young guy too. I've been a public defender for about 5 years now. I agree with the top comment that there's little correlation between the offense and the person. One of my favorite, funniest, most socially well-adjusted clients was a woman accused of murdering her teenage son in cold blood. The most aggressive, angry, and uncooperative client I've ever had was charged with forging his signature on a few traffic summons. You almost never see the stereotypical, dead-eyed sociopathic type. The idea that you walk into the attorney room, sit down face to face with your client, and walk out chilled to the bone by the criminality of your client is just laughable. Most clients are just ordinary people, usually significantly below average IQ, with addiction issues and low emotional intelligence. You feel pity, not fear. Having said that, the most disturbing defendant I've ever seen was represented by terrible private counsel. He was a dog fighter and owned about 30 dogs, which he kept in a separate house about a mile away from his actual home. One day, he just stopped going to the house where he kept the dogs, stopped feeding them, just left them to die. The dogs were eventually discovered when neighbors reported the stench to police. The dogs were found, but it was too late. I don't want to get graphic, but most of the dogs were caged and were in varying stages of decomposition. He gave a statement to police, where he claimed that gout made it difficult for him to walk, so it would have been painful for him to walk to the house where he kept the dogs. Unprompted and apparently not realizing that this was even more incriminating, he told police that his friends and wife had offered to feed the dogs and care for them while he was sick, but he told them not to worry about it, multiple times as months passed. He then testified at his sentencing without affect or change in tone, that he understood that the prosecutor was upset about the dogs, but he was too sick to care of them. He seemed completely unperturbed that the dogs had starved, unconcerned that they had died horribly. The tone of his testimony was just incredible annoyance that he had gotten sick and now was charged with crimes. It's not even that he thought they were just dogs. He didn't even appear to understand that other people might be upset that living things died horribly. He testified about those dogs starving to death the same way you would talk about accidentally forgetting to water a plant. It was inexplicable, and the closest I've come to seeing something approaching genuine Hannibal Lecter-esque sociopathy. My father had a law office when I was a teen, and he practiced mostly family law, but from time to time would handle other issues that people in the small town had. One repeat offender was a guy I will call Tom Tomlinson. He was constantly needing legal services for one minor thing after another, always before booking. Good customer, always paid on time, never complained. Found out later when I was at a party and Tom addressed me with courtesy, the dorky kid in the Dockers and polo, and one of the toughs my own age asked, "How do you know big man?" That he may not have been the person I originally thought. Later, the largest failed FBI operation failed to catch him, had nothing to do with me or mine, that I found out he was a leader in the Aryan Nation and responsible for the largest meth production in the US. I would happily ask my dad for more info, but he passed in January. He was one of the most disturbing people I've ever met, but not number one. Another was a cleaner for the MM. He was 17 to 19 years old, and we would hang out. Nice guy. Carried a pager, mid-90s, and when it went off, he would split, regardless of what was going on at the time. Found out later that he was being paged with the location of a car to pick up and dispose of the contents of the trunk before getting rid of the car. It was not disturbing because of what he did, but rather the lack of empathy for the job. It was just meat he was dumping in a hole. Number one was a serial killer. Eventually, he was caught in Aurora, Colorado, but he was living at the same trailer park I was at when we met. He was hired to watch a friend of mine, girl the same age as I. We were 9 to 10 at the time, and he was a greasy creep. But my friend's mom was poor, we all were, and he enabled her to hold a regular job. She was between a rock and a hard place. So one day, her and I walk home together, play for a bit, and then go to our respective trailers. A few hours later, he, the SK, comes by and asks if we have seen the girl. Not since we were done playing after school. We looked for her for 3 days. My dad, the serial killer, me, and the county sheriff. Traced every path we walked, everywhere we played. Drugged the lakes for her body, followed lion tracks looking for blood, everything we could think of. Nothing. The sheriff wrote it off as her father kidnapping her and taking her to Mexico. Nope. Her dead body was under the serial killer's bed the whole time. Found out years later when he was arrested. That guy was number one. I was an intern for 2 years in the federal public defense area in Brazil. Never really got many disturbing cases because I was in the federal area, which only includes federal crimes, so no murder, rape, etc. One day, I was preparing the defense of this guy who was accused of counterfeiting money. Out of curiosity, I decided to Google his name. Dude. The first thing that shows up is Creepy, his nickname. He was a serial killer who had murdered more than 30 people. He was involved in drug traffic. Police all over the country were looking for him, and guess what? What finally got him was false money. And I honestly think he was innocent of that crime at least. The commotion was so large that police officers went to the prison he was locked up in just to take a look at him. Well, I did his defense. Obvious. Dude might be a murderer and a serial killer, but there was no evidence of him counterfeiting money. That's justice. They may be terrible people, but maybe, just maybe, they are innocent in this particular case, and you have to do your best to defend them. No regrets.